Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Nick Files. I'm your host, Nick Muley. So, today we're going to be doing something very different compared to previous episodes. If you guys have not seen if you guys didn't see the announcement earlier today, you, wait, hang on one second. What's going on here? Oh, it's this. Okay, you know what? There was a issue with one of the destinations here. Okay. All right, I'm gonna have to worry about that later after the show. Hey, what's going on, Eric? Good to see you. Hello, Rita. Thanks for joining in. So, anyways, like I said, we're gonna do something a little bit different today. For those who have watched previous episode of Nick Files, you guys have always known all too well that usually I do one or two locations or cases uh, that we usually will focus on. Well, today, if you haven't seen the announcement, we're actually going to be focusing, and there's definitely going to be more than two parts to this. That's for sure. We are going to be focusing on an entire town that is said to be haunted, and not only just on the haunted locations though. I also threw in a number of historic locations as well that have no association or ghost stories associated with it, which also would really give another good way to kind of explain the history of the town itself. And that town we're going to be focusing on is Athens, Ohio, down in down in the southeastern part of the state. And later, we'll also be focusing on another nearby town that's not far from Athens, which is Marietta, Ohio, which ironically enough is the oldest town in the state of Ohio. In fact, that was not only is it the only oldest town, but it was also the town that was founded even before Ohio ever became a state. But for now, we're going to be focusing on Athens, which has to be probably the second or third oldest, if I'm correct. I could be wrong. Hey, what's going on, Catherine? Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. So before we get started, I actually thought I'd do something also another little different thing here. I'm only going to play a minute of it because I think this would definitely be a great way to kind of start the opening and give this town an introduction, if you will. I don't know if you guys remember from, I know this was over 20 years ago. If you guys remember the show Scariest Places on Earth, this location, in fact, was the first one they introduced in the show, and I just always loved how they opened the show up for Athens. So what I'm going to do very quickly, I'm only just going to play a minute of footage, which is just the beginning of it, of course, with Linda Blair, along with the introduction of Athens, Ohio. And then once we get to it, we'll get started. We'll begin our journey, if you will, very long journey into the first location I have for this presentation. So give me 1 second here. I always have to have fun with all the sharing stuff. Hopefully this time you guys will be able to hear it, because I know last time when I tried playing something, you guys can hear on the video. So let me know if you guys could hear it. Like I said, I'm only going to play just a minute of it. So here we go.
What is it that makes a place scary? A chill in the air? Sinister shadows? Or is it something more? Something unseen? Freshman students at Ohio University found out that although everything looked innocent on the outside, on the inside, this college campus harbored a history of horror.
According to the British Society for Psychical Research, the 13th most haunted place on Earth is Athens, Ohio.
I think it's the combination of things here in Athens. You have strange things, ghosts, poltergeist activity. The room with the 666. Wait a minute, we'll figure this out. Yeah, spooky cemetery. You throw in a crying angel, a haunted mental health center, residence halls that have ghostly inhabitants walking the halls at night, and you end up with a pretty spooky but pretty special place.
All right, so just wanted to give that introduction because now it's just going to go right into the entire show. So I thought that'd be a good way to start the introduction. So with that out of the way, the first location I have on this ever-growing list is I'm going to share this once again. Hang on, let me just make sure that the sharing is working correctly while I'm doing this. And I thought this location in particular would be the one to really start things off because it's one of the most notorious in the town of Athens. So that location that we have for today, some of you may have probably heard of this, some of you haven't, but it's also what I'm going to present is it's a beautiful style building, but it's also one of the creepiest looking buildings as well. And that building is the Athens Mental Health Center, or better known as the Ridges. This is the building that you guys just saw in the video. And believe it or not, this is a location I've actually been to. And they definitely have it right. It's a very beautiful Victorian style building, but it is that classic type of location where it's literally up on the hill. There's wooded areas around, although it's not completely alone because it is owned by Ohio University. So it is part of campus, but still, the fact that it's situated up on a hill with these ever-growing woods and also a nearby river, it definitely has the classic creepy type building on the hill scenario. And even when I was there, ironically enough, the weather was just like what you see in the picture here. It was cloudy, it was kind of foggy. So you just get this really eerie feeling just by looking at this building. Imagine driving by it though at night. I mean, one look at this could probably send you running. So to give some history on this place, because this does have an interesting history, although I'm sure let's see here. Just want to get to the responses very quickly, just to say hello to everybody who's tuning in. Who do we have on as of right now? Let's see. Is that place has two spirits? Well, sort of in a way, Anthony. I guess it depends. As I explain the story, I mean, eventually I'll get to the paranormal stories of it, but you know, I don't know if it's exactly what you're telling me, but it very well may be. Hey, Lauren, good to see you. Appreciate you always tuning in. All right, so let's get right down to business. So, as the history of the Athens Mental Health Center, or the Ridges, the large complex of buildings sited on a wooded hillside in Athens, Ohio, overlooking the campus of Ohio University, which is known today as the Ridges, was originally called the Athens Lunatic Asylum and later the Athens State Hospital, as it was originally conceived during the late 19th century, with additional building in the early 20th century. The construction and development of this facility for the mentally ill was a massive undertaking. In the 19th century, changes in attitudes about mental illness and the role of governments in responding to social problems led to development of asylums, places of respite and healing. The emergence of a coherent philosophy for treatment of mentally ill, the Kirkbride Plan, gave a roadmap for the creation of asylums. The post-Civil War era Ohio was in a position to act on this progressive vision. Community members were strongly invested in this facility from its beginnings, though through their advocacy and support that determined its location. Dr. Story Kirkbride's plan outlined a new approach to the challenges of mental illness. Kirkbride advocated for moral treatment, an approach that emphasized humane conditions with the goal of rehabilitating patients to the highest extent possible. This included creating the physical building to certain specifications, including size, access to light and fresh air, a natural setting for recreation, stimulation, and farming. The land where the hospital was built originally belonged to the Arthur Coates and Eliakim H. Hoare farms, who owned the land for over 6 years before the hospital was built. On November 5th, 1868, the ground was broken and the first cornerstone was laid. The first iteration of the asylum consisted of only 141 acres and over the years grew. These are actual photos that I managed to find from the Ohio archives. I was really amazed I was actually able to find these pictures, because when it comes to the construction of historic buildings, there's very, unless it's like a very well-known building, it's relatively rare for me to find actual photos of the building's construction. So this was when they were starting to lay down the bricks for eventually the Athens Lunatic Asylum. So it's quite amazing I was able to find those. And the Ohio Historic Archives really has a lot to offer. So I definitely want to give credit for the Ohio Archives for this. The architect for the original building was Levi T. Schofield of Cleveland, who originally took inspiration for his design from a book of mental health hospital designs. He also, interestingly enough, which is going to be a location that eventually I'm going to be covering on this show soon, he also designed the Ohio State Reformatory. It took 6 years to build the asylum. On January 9th, 1874, the Athens Lunatic Asylum opened its doors on more than 1,000 acres on the former Coates farm. Now these pictures right here, these were taken, I think, around the time when this building first opened. These are all the staff members that the very first staff members that ever worked here at the asylum. The left one here, even though there are some different, here, put it this way. The two pictures are actually different. Obviously, you can see there's lesser people in this one and there's more on this side. The reason for that is the left picture here is a photo of the employees who worked there during the day. The right side one here are for those who worked the night shift, despite the fact that many of those who worked in the day shift seen in this picture also worked the night shift. So, in fact, you can a perfect example. You can see there's a guy standing right. It does have the names on it. Of course, I cannot identify, everybody in this picture, but you can see there's a guy standing here in the corner who's with the day shift crew. And then the very next photo here, you can see he's sitting down for the night shift. So it must have been a pretty good job. Well, and of course, obviously, the more you work, probably the more money you made. Within 2 years of its opening, the hospital was renamed the Athens Hospital for the Insane. Later, believe this or not, the hospital would be called several different names, some a bit questionable over the years. And I do have all the names that I managed to list out and in chronological order. So obviously, right at the beginning, it was originally called the Athens Lunatic Asylum from 1868 to 1875. Then it became the Southeastern Ohio Hospital for the Insane that same year in 1875. Then it became the Athens Hospital for the Insane from 1876 to 1878. Then it became the Athens Asylum for the Insane, which this name lasted longer than the previous ones. Obviously, this one lasted from 1878 to 1894, so well over almost 15 years. Then it became known, and this was at its longest term, then it became known as the Athens State Hospital from 1894 to 1968. Then it was once again, ironically enough, this was almost similar to the secondary name. Then it became known as the Southeastern Ohio Mental Health Center just for about a year, from 1968 to 1969. And then finally, then it became once again known as the Athens Mental Health Center from 1969 to 1975. And finally, and I just realized I have a picture blocking. You know what? Let me fix that right now, just so I could, because that picture is blocking. Give me 1 second here. Whoops. All right. Okay, here we go. All right, now we're. Damn, he said mistakes. There we go. Okay, now we got it. So let me go back to sharing once again. And as I'm doing this, let's. Oh, I just realized I have the comment up by mistake. Your profile picture is a painting of what you did. Just very quickly, just to see everybody's comments. What's up, David? Your alma mater, is that you mean by the Ridges, or if you can give me a little understanding of what that means? November 5th is your granddaughter's birthday. Check that out. Hey, what's going on, Mort? Appreciate it. Good evening, Annette. Oh, and trust me, Lauren, you're going to be learning more about the history. There's so much more. Honestly, I don't even know if, even though I got a few slideshows ready for today, I don't even know if we're going to get through all of them, because out of all the slideshows I have for Athens, Ohio, this place in particular is probably going to be the longest one. So we'll see how things go as time goes on. All right, so let me get back to doing the sharing once again, and we'll pick up from where we left off. Okay, so now this is what I was trying to get to. So it was the Athens Mental Health Center from 1969 to 1975. Then it became known as the Athens Mental Health and Mental Retardation Center from 1975 to 1979. Then it changed once again to the Athens Mental Health and Development Center from 1979 to 1981. Then again, the Athens Mental Health Center from 1981 all the way up to its closing in 1993. So that was all of the previous names of this place before it was closed down. And eventually, where's the name, the Ridges, and how that it got that name, we're going to explain a little bit later in the presentation. In the slideshow. So, upon its opening, the first patient to be admitted to the asylum was a 14-year-old girl with epilepsy. Her parents thought to be possessed by a demon, and therefore locked her away. Epilepsy was considered a major cause of insanity and reason for admission to the hospital in the early years. Although it's also said that the first patient at the asylum was Thomas Armstrong of Belmont County, although not much else is known about him. Daniel Freema was not far behind Thomas, after Daniel claimed to be the second coming of Christ. The asylum was based on the groundbreaking work of Dorothea Dix, a social reformer, and Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride, who I mentioned earlier, superintendent of the Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane for 43 years, who became a leader and leading proponent of the theory that the institution itself, in the moral treatment concepts as the basis for asylum design, construction, and administration, played a key role in the cure of patients. An author in an influential treatise, I guess, on hospital design called On the Construction, Organization, and General Arrangements of Hospitals for the Insane. Kirkbride planned asylums. I'm sure a couple of you guys are probably familiar with that term, the Kirkbride plan asylums. They are the most recognizably characterized by the staggered batwing floor plan, such as this, in this case, with the Athens Mental Health Center, from a hillside view, if I'm correct. This was, I believe, taken in either in the 1890s or early 1900s, somewhere around there. And that also gives you guys basically an idea of really how huge this hospital pretty much was. What I was more amazed of finding when I was putting this together is just, at first, I couldn't really find a lot of pictures on this location. But once again, giving credit to the Ohio Historical Archives, they had a lot of pictures that it was really amazing that, again, such a place like this had so many old photographs of this place. So, but they are usually most recognizably characterized by the staggered batwing floor plan of their wards. high Victorian Gothic architecture and their sprawling grounds. 3 Ohio mental institutions were constructed according to the Kirkbride plan: Dayton, Athens, and Columbus, which I think, if I'm correct, I don't know if they're saying for just Columbus. It might be also Dayton too, so correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody from Ohio is watching. But Columbus since has been demolished. I'm not sure about Dayton's institution fate. So definitely let me know what the story is for that one. But Columbus's institution has since been demolished. Many mental institutions sprouted up across the country during this time period, due in large part to Civil War veterans who were suffering from what is now known, as we definitely know as of today, as post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a actual postcard that I was able to find. Now this is an even better picture, because now you guys can get a real view. The first picture, yes, is an actual picture. You can kind of see someone how big it is, but now actually having the front of the building in this postcard now gives you a really good idea of really how big this place was. So this place is, even as of today, this place, it is massive. It's huge. So in accordance with the Kirkbride plan, the main building was to include a central administration building, a right wing, and a left wing. The main building itself is 4 stories tall, 853 feet long, and 60 feet in width, and was originally built, as I said earlier, on 141 acres of land. The administration building held the entrance hall, offices, and a reception area, while there was a wing for men on one side and a wing for women on the other, each with their own separate dining halls. Behind the main building was the laundry and boiler rooms. Also behind and underneath the private and public space in each wing, there were heating and mechanical systems, kitchens, storerooms, cellars, and workspaces for residents and staff. A lot of work in the asylum was done by patients that were still well enough to work. Outside the building, they had a lake, wooded areas, a waterfall, and a spring to help create a relaxing and welcoming environment. And now what I'm going to be presenting, some of these are pictures and some of these are postcards. Once again, there were so many of them that understandably I wasn't going to be able to add every single one here on the slideshow, so I had to add as many as I could so you guys can get an idea of what life at the asylum was when it first opened. Now, these are actual pictures. These were taken, I believe, in the 1890s of different patients as well as staff members. It wasn't just, these the staff members that were being treated and had this welcoming environment. The staff members, for the most part, were pretty much allowed to partake in, pretty much a lot of the activities that the patients were undergoing. So you could see in this picture right here that I believe, obviously, it's right near a lake area. This was, I believe, taken in 1893, somewhere in the 1890s, if I'm correct. And then this one here, you have, I think they're playing baseball, if I'm correct. And then, of course, obviously, to add more of the welcoming environment was a lot of the postcards that were taken. And of course, it's not very typical when I show such buildings like this that when it comes to postcards, you really have a lot of these in color. So it's, of course, the majority of these pictures are mostly focusing on the lake, because that was one of the most infamous areas of the asylum where a lot of patients and staff members often relaxed. And I got more photos to show. This is more of the bridge. Here is to the entrance to the state hospital. This is the waterfall that I briefly mentioned. That was often that was another feature to the grounds of the asylum. That's the parkway. Here's another view of the bridge. Here's the fountain. More feature photos of the lake. And then this, it's just a photo, a postcard, understandably, but this is a rare color image of the asylum from its days when it was still in operation. I just want to go quickly onto the comments very quick. Let's see. Okay, and the problem with people think that people with mental problems were possessed instead of just having mental issues. Yeah, I know. That was in those days. If basically if people thought, I mean, it was the typical type of issue, unfortunately, we had in those days, that if you displayed unusual behavior, you had to go to the asylum. It's because they at that time they considered it not normal, if you know what I mean. So I that really was a problem, especially back in 19th century and even long in the 19th century and early 20th century United States. Oh, Raymond, so it's not far from you. Let me know if have you been there before, just out of curiosity. And yes, Lauren, they're very amazing photographs. And there's, like I said, there's more where that comes from. Okay, let's get back to the get back to this. All right, and I believe I got one more slide featuring more of the grounds of the asylum. Now, this goes once again from postcards to to actual photographs. I gotta hand it to the archives. I mean, again, the fact that I was able to find so many of these pictures is this is without a shadow of a doubt, aside from maybe when I did the presentation on the Galveston hurricane of 1900, this literally is the most amount of photographs I've ever collected for one particular location. So, and it's something I think it definitely needs to be seen. So again, Ohio Historical Archives, thank you for this. If you guys have more pictures involving this location or any other places in Athens, Ohio, or even Marietta, I'd be glad to have a copy of it. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Okay, so okay, I was lying. Okay, I had one more. This is most likely the last one that has photographs in it. So now these photos here, if I'm correct, these appear to be a little bit later. I believe these were probably taken sometime either in the early 1900s or probably sometime in the early 1920s, considering the hairstyles in some of these photos. Okay, so now getting back onto the history of this location. The site was considered as important as the building, and Kirkbride suggested that mental institutions be located in the country and be surrounded by attractive scenery. In addition, he suggested that every hospital have adequate acreage for farming, gardening, exercise, labor, and occupation. The development of the grounds began in the 1870s and continued for many years. Landscape architect Herman Harlan, a student of Frederick Olmsted, designer of New York City's Central Park from Cincinnati, worked with Athens gardener George Link to create a park-like setting of approximately 60 acres. By the early 20th century, there were 4 ponds, a waterfall, paths, and a large variety of types of trees, plants, and flowers. Some of Harlan's other landscape designs are seen in Cincinnati's Spring Grove Cemetery and the Oval on the campus of Ohio State University in Columbus. The main building, now getting back to the actual building itself, I know the text is probably a little bit small for you guys to read, but of course, obviously, I'll be reading it because this was quite a slide that I had to add quite a number of photos in. So, the main building had 544 patient rooms and was to house 572 patients, almost double Kirkbride's recommendation. 200 patients were housed when it opened, but quickly grew past maximum capacity. The grounds were expanded several times during the asylum's history, adding many outbuildings, including a tuberculosis ward to help prevent overcrowding, dairy barn, and a gymnasium, which that's the dairy barn. I wasn't able to find necessarily the tuberculosis ward photo or gymnasium. This was the only one I was able to really find involving that sentence. The main building's design centered around the idea that it was very therapeutic for patients to live in a home environment. Now, this photo right here, this was taken, I believe, in, I think this was taken in the 1880s, if I'm correct. I think this was in the 1880s. Unfortunately, I mean, that was actually, in fact, the ballroom. Unfortunately, the ballroom no longer exists because as a result, there was a fire that did occur in that at one point. Actually, I got the picture right here on the phone. This was taken before a fire broke out, and it was eventually divided into 2 floors to help ease space restrictions. Now, this was the actual interior. I don't know if this was the actual entrance to the asylum, because I remember when I walked in there, it was a lot different, but I did have another photo of the actual entrance itself, like entrance into the administration building. During its operation, the hospital provided services to a variety of patients suffering from all kinds of slight distress, to mental illness, including Civil War veterans, rebellious teenagers, children, homeless people, elderly people, wayward people, and even violent criminals suffering from various mental disabilities, which you throw all those in together, especially with the violent criminals, not a good thing. Also, tuberculosis patients were taken care of in the 7 cottages, which are part of this massive terrain, all of whom were housed in this one asylum, but all got different levels of treatments to fit the situation. These are all the different cabins that I was able to find. Obviously, it does show a description of which particular buildings they were. Obviously, in this picture here, this was the tuberculosis ward. Then you got the suicide ward. I don't remember exactly what these ones were. These were actually, now these photos, these last 2 in particular, these were taken at a much later time, as you can probably tell from the format of these pictures. A lot of these here, once again, were either taken during the late 19th or early 20th century. These 2 photos in particular, as I remember from the historic archives, were taken back in the 1970s. So these were taken much later, and it's quite interesting to know that they really didn't change very much during their times of operation. So because of all these different cottages, and the expansion, this is why the facility was so sprawling and included so many outbuildings. It wasn't until 1973 that these patients were compensated for their labor with minimum wages. The least disturbed patients were housed near the center of the building to encourage socializing and human interaction. These patients often had free roam of the grounds and participated in recreational activities, plays, and church services. The more violent and severe patients were housed near the ends of the buildings. Near the end of the buildings. I think it's sings, or I'm not sure if that's the right word. Farthest, in this case, they were farthest from the building's entry and exit. The asylum is about 4,000 acres large, which can be compared to 800 soccer fields. This is an actual map of the asylum. I know we've shown pictures before, but now I have an actual map of the plan for the Athens Lunatic Asylum. I believe this may have been This may have been created prior to the asylum's construction. I should have actually put this at the beginning of the slideshow instead, but this is pretty much how large, not only just the building itself, as you can see right here, but also how much acres that the asylum owned. So you got the rivers over here. You got the roads that go through where people drop people off, and then you got the surrounding roads. So this was basically the entire property of this hotel. That's great. Hotel of this hospital. Was never a hotel. It was a hospital. Now today, when you go to that area, you can obviously tell in this map that this was the only building that was in sight. Today, with the Ohio University now owning the asylum, much of this area now is covered with other campus buildings that were built for the Ohio universities. But at that time, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Waverly Hills Sanatorium down in Louisville, Kentucky, where this building was basically placed up on a hill in a wooded area far away from the rest of the population. So very similar plan, of course, understandably, in this case with the Athens Lunatic Asylum. It's older than Waverly because, as I think a lot of us know, Waverly came much later. So we're talking well over 50, 60 years, even before Waverly was ever built. But still, it had a very classic design to it. And to put it in a very wooded park-like setting was, at least for them at the time, a perfect way to isolate those from the rest of the population. I just want to go back, seeing what everybody's saying. Okay, we got a few people commenting. Oh, my pleasure, Yvonne. This has been this is actually one of my favorite locations. So this has been a place I've really I've really wanted to present for the longest time. Annette, a woman said who were said to be prone to excitable behavior. All it took for a husband to be rid of his wife was a complaint and she would be locked up. Unfortunately, it's just amazing of how you could just make one complaint and next thing you know, you're sent to the asylum. It's very unfortunate of how easy it was to be locked up at that time. Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate it. Lauren, the architecture back then was amazing. They really knew how to design, but yeah, they really did. It really took the Kirkbride plan was certainly, in spite that some of these buildings had a relatively dark history associated with it, especially like with mental abuse and whatnot. Either way, in spite of that, they still did a great job building these type of buildings, for mental patients. And believe it or not, I heard that episode that I briefly showed of Scariest Places on Earth about the Athens Mental Health Center. One of the guys actually said it's a building that is constructed of 18 million bricks. Put 18 million bricks out, do the math, and see how they were able to make such a building like that, up on the hill. What's going on, AJ? Good to see you. Hey, Joe, how are you? Good to appreciate you tuning in. Okay, back to business. I hope I didn't. Okay, sorry. I thought for a second that I lost the slideshow. Okay, so moving forward. Hang on one second here, guys. Okay, now I understand what's going on. Bear with me for just one moment. Someone was asking about the link for the show. Apparently she didn't get it, so I'm just going to send it to her. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send it very quickly, and then we'll get right back on track. Okay, it didn't take too long for her to miss out. Okay, so Dr. Thomas Kirkbride believed the key words for mental patients were rest, cleanliness, and regularity. Consequently, the overcrowding led to a huge decline of proper individual care. At its peak, over 2,000 patients were being treated, which of course was unacceptable according to the method. The asylum created a lot of employment for people living in the surrounding area. Unfortunately, however, and this is typical with a lot of these mental hospitals at the time, this medical staff was often unskilled, which when you think about it, I mean, understandably, sometimes it wasn't always a lot of these employees' fault for not really getting the education of how to treat patients. but whether intentional or accidental, that's usually, I think you guys probably already know where this is going to be going. Unfortunately, that's usually a recipe for disaster when it comes to employees working with mental patients. Most days, a single nurse would be responsible for 50 patients. Records from the asylum document some of the now discredited theories of the causes of mental illness, as well as the practice of harmful treatments. The Ohio University Archives collection information regarding employees' background training, which range from full training and qualification to a complete lack thereof. Now, unfortunately, again, I think some of you guys are knowing where this is going. Most disturbing is the documentation of some of the cruel treatment methods used for the patients at the asylum. Consisted of hydrotherapy, ice water baths, electroshock therapy, restraints, and early psychotropic drugs, many of which have been discredited today as extremely inhumane ways of treating a patient. This made procedures such as the most prominent, commonly much feared lobotomy treatments risky. This procedure was thought to be the cure to numerous ailments. During these treatments, the skull is open and the neural passages are separated midway through the brain. A thick needle was drilled into the patient's skull, into the brain, through a spot right above the eye. Apart from the fact that a wrong lobotomy could lead to death, it could also lead to a condition in which the patient would be left in a vegetable-like state, locked inside their own body forever. The doctors here performed over 200 lobotomies. Another feared treatment called hydrotherapy, as I mentioned above, was performed daily. During this treatment, the patient would be bathed in extremely cold or extremely hot water, for extended periods of time. That had to have been extremely painful. Jeez. And last but not least, and most disturbingly, there was the electroshock therapy method, in which a patient was exposed to a highly dosed power surge, which caused the body to convulse, sometimes submerged in water, or directly to the temples from brine-soaked electrodes. Sometimes these convulsions were so intense that even bones would break. See on everybody on the chat. Hey, Rachel. Yeah, sorry I didn't say anything right before we went on live. It was, again, I was having trouble with broadcasting on one of the other destinations, but I'm going to try to get that fixed sometime after the show. Yes, and they were cruel and torturous places. As peaceful and as beautiful as it first started off, and not all patients had to go through that. Some of these patients did actually have pretty good lives here, but unfortunately there were many others that were not so lucky. So there was a light side and a dark side to this place. And yes, inmates were used to run the places, but when they first started, though, as I mentioned earlier, they it wasn't as intense, or they didn't just randomly choose people to make to run the asylum. This was being ran by staff members. The problem was, when it came to a place like this, was that it was not necessarily that they wanted to be cruel and inhumane, but the lack thereof education. A lot of these people who worked at the asylum didn't get the education, or were taught necessarily, of how to treat mental patients with certain disabilities, or certain issues that a lot of these people had. It was just what these employees thought they were supposed to be doing. As much as I hate to say it, but that's sometimes the case with some of these asylums. So moving forward. Oh wait, did I already? Okay, I already got rid of the comment. All right, here we go. Now, here's where things get a little bit more darker. I should have said before, we were talking about the lighter side of this place. Now we're going to be talking about the darker side of this location. The first annual report lists 31 men and 19 women as having their insanity caused by epilepsy. General ill health accounted for the admission of 39 men and 44 women in the first 3 years of the hospital's operation. The Athens Asylum represented the vanguard in the treatment of mental health patients. Back then, there was an enormous list which was used as a manual for admitting people at an asylum. Ailments such as menopause, menstruation issues, alcohol addiction and abuse, epilepsy, tuberculosis, and even asthma were illnesses and were cause for enrollment in the hospital. You know, it's a very unfortunate fact that they were considered illnesses, because you have to remember, when it comes to certain issues, again, with, like I said before, when it comes to certain issues people have, certain type of disabilities, studies in those cases not only were not well understood as they are today, but furthermore, studies of such of these type of problems that some of these folks had, that this was the study of that was still very much primitive, or still in its infancy. So it's no wonder why a lot of these people never really understood what these people were going through. I mean, I understand if it was something like tuberculosis, because even then that was truly considered a disease. But menopause, menstruation issues, alcohol addiction and abuse, epilepsy, and asthma considered illnesses. I mean, I don't necessarily blame everybody for not knowing that they were not considered illnesses, but either way, the way of how they treated these patients with them was just absolutely insane. Now, for the female patients hospitalized during these first 3 years of the asylum's operation, the leading causes of insanity are recorded as puerperal condition, 51 women, which was of 51 women, change of life, which was of 32 women, and menstrual derangements, which was of 29 women. Women with postpartum depression or hysteria was labeled insane and sent to recover in the institution. Women were often see, Annette, this is exactly what you were just saying a few minutes ago. Women were often institutionalized for unnecessary, ridiculous, or sometimes even outright fallacious reasons. The second most common cause of insanity, as recorded in the first annual report, is intemperance and dissipation. In the hospital's first 3 years of operation, according to the annual report of 1876, 81 men and 1 woman, believe this or not, were diagnosed as having their insanity mainly caused by masturbation. And this is no joke. It was apparently, and I know a number of other locations did this, for not to get too personal or graphic, but the facts were people often were known to be pleasuring themselves, if you will. That too was considered either an illness, or you were considered mentally insane, unfortunately. And as a result, if you were caught masturbating either in private or in public, you were basically sent off to the asylum, because they considered that an illness, unfortunately. Even though that we now know today that's just a natural thing, but again, back then that was considered an illness. It was definitely a very hard time for a lot of these people, which I can't even imagine. 56 men and 1 woman were diagnosed as having. Oh wait, this already kind of does say something like that. Oh wait, maybe it's just, maybe it was just. Oh wait, no, never. Yeah, it's the same. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I should have combined the two sentences. So 56 men and 1 woman were diagnosed as having their insanity caused by intemperance and dissipation during the same period of time. Now, when a family member was admitted, Typical of such places like this, once again, all contact was broken off. That was best for the patient according to the Kirkbride method. Don't get me wrong, the Kirkbride plan for these buildings was really well done, but the Kirkbride method were to the point that you can no longer have any type of contact with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, your children probably. That's a pretty harsh decision. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of patients who, once they were left at a place like this, they were probably never going to see their families again. They probably never even received letters, from them. It's definitely a very sad, lonely lifestyle. It was definitely a very lonely and sad lifestyle. Now, this is perhaps why some people, 700 women and 959 men who died during their stay at the asylum, were buried on the premises with only a number on the headstone, not even a name. They just put their patient number on their headstone. And again, we've seen a lot of other places, historic hospitals, that do the same thing. We still kind of see that even today with a lot of our prisons. But man, a place like this, though, burying that person to the point where you don't even know who that patient's name is except their number, it's like not even death. It's like you're forever basically forgotten even after death. It's horrible. Okay, let's see here. So, true, my family. Oh, wow. I had no idea, Rachel. Yours was PTSD and others were dementia. Wow. Hey, Lisa. Yeah, it's great information. Don't get me wrong, but it's quite a sad story at the same time. Even being a single mother would see you thrown in one and your children would be taken. Oh my God. That is just, imagine again, if you're married and you have to be admitted to the asylum and your entire, like I said, your entire family, including your children, you never get to, you could be stuck there for years and never even get to live to see your children grow up. It was just very, very hard times. Okay, this photo here actually shows the year this time. This was taken in 1909. Now, fortunately, well, not necessarily fortunately, by the turn of the century, mental health advocates were beginning to advocate a different physical plan for treatment of the mentally ill, the cottage plan. The gaining popularity of this movement is evident from the number of independent buildings constructed during the first decade of the 20th century. In 1903, moral treatment model shifted to custodial care model, which I believe was better than what the original plan was. This plan shifted from asylum-based care to research-based modern medicine specialties. Cottages were constructed to house even more patients, grouping patients in dormitory-like rooms. More and more buildings were added when the number of patients increased. As asylums gained popularity in the early 1900s, it became, as I mentioned, it became commonplace for families to drop off elderly relatives who they couldn't care for and rebellious teenagers. Like many institutes around this time, the asylum would often pay for patients leading families to give their disturbed relatives to the asylum for care and easy money. A lot of the patients also arrived due to court orders, meaning a lot of these people didn't have living family or had been disowned. So it also kind of became kind of like somewhat of a shelter, if you will. Actually, it just read my mind. The homeless would also use the institution for temporary shelter. By the early 1900s, the population of Athens Lunatic Asylum grew from 200 to 2,000, as I mentioned earlier, leading to overcrowding and a decline in the quality of treatment. With a decrease in care and attention, treatment led to primitive techniques. See, it's showing some of the same stuff again, including water treatment, shock therapy, lobotomy, and the additional Oh, wait. Okay, you know what? It is okay. Um, I think it actually continues on with that. It's not necessarily repeating itself, but it does add a little bit more to the treatment that patients had to go through. Okay. So, with the decrease in care and attention, treatment led to primitive techniques, including water treatment, once again, shock therapy, lobotomy, and the additional transorbital orbital lobotomy, which I didn't mention earlier. That is where an unconscious person has a thin metal instrument inserted through their tear duct and is moved back and forth to sever the neural receptors. Yikes, that sounds extremely, extremely painful. That imagine the pain people had to go through after that was done. The last two options, understandably, were tricky and claimed the lives of many. The asylum, not to mention, the asylum became a regular stop for a physician named Dr. Walter J. Freeman, who conducted these procedures, most notably the transorbital lobotomy. Surprisingly, there was no photo. I was unable to find any photographs of him. There's a mistype right there, which I'll have to fix after the show. But yeah, surprisingly, there are no photographs of Dr. Dr. Walter J. Freeman. I tried looking through the Ohio archives, but was unable to find a photo. Either if there are any photographs of him, most likely they are either unavailable or there are no photographs of him anymore and may have essentially been lost to time. But because of these lobotomies that Dr. J. I keep saying Dr. J. Because of the amount of lobotomies that Dr. Walter J. Freeman conducted, especially the transorbital lobotomy, he later became known, ironically enough, as Dr. Lobotomy. This simpler lobotomy became something of a craze in mental health circles up through the 60s. It wasn't until literally the 1960s that, for the most part, lobotomies were finally coming to an end. So we're talking well over a good 60, almost 70 years of lobotomies that were conducted at certain hospitals and asylums. Dr. Freeman's method involved knocking the patient unconscious with electric shocks, then rolling an eyelid back and inserting a thin metal ice pick-like instrument called a leucotome, which he often referred to them as his ice picks, through a tear duct. A mallet was used to tap the instrument the proper depth into the brain. Oh my God. Next, I apologize if this starts sounding graphic. Next, it was sawed back and forth to sever the neural receptors. Oh my God. Sometimes, I don't know how much worse this can get. Sometimes this was done in both eyes. Jesus Christ. There is some evidence that this method actually helped some people with very severe conditions, but much more often, the patient had horrible side effects and in many cases ended up nearly catatonic. I'm not surprised. Eric, I just got a photo from, hang on a second. I just want to go to the comments very quick. Eric, this is a photograph of Dr. Walter J. Freeman. I hope it is. I didn't see it earlier. So, okay, so I don't know if this is, I'm going to have to, if you could send me the, I don't know how I missed this. So apparently Eric just sent me a photograph of apparently who Walter, oh, wait, hang on. Let me turn off the green screen first. He had sent me a photo of apparently Dr. Walter J. Freeman. I'm going to just stop the screen for just a moment so you guys can get a full picture of what he looks like. This was apparently Dr. Lobotomy. All right. So, yes, definitely painful and cruel. That was a very, very painful operation to go through. All right, so let's go back here. Now, unfortunately, as the years rolled on, the living conditions weren't much better. Patients shared bunks intended for one person and were often restrained. Patients spoke out by carving messages such as "I was never crazy" in the sandstone and wood trim. It wouldn't be, see, it's exactly like how I just said. It wouldn't be until the 1960s when drugs took over as the main form of treatment. The facility adapted evolving theories of the best practices for treating mental health patients, and in the 1940s, the facility was renamed the Athens State Hospital. This site was cherished by the local community, as many residents have family members that worked at the hospital or were patients there. The community and county residents used the ground. Oh wait, I didn't want to spoil that. The community and county residents used the grounds of the hospital as a public park, and many have fond memories of picnicking and going, believe it or not, to see the alligator that once resided in the fountain at the Athens State Hospital. Yes, guys, it's true. Somehow, I was unable to really find the story about it, but they actually got an alligator to live in the fountain right in front of the asylum. Now, understandably, at this time, as you guys could probably tell, life at the asylum was starting to get a little bit better. Because by the 1940s, I think understanding of such mental health issues were starting to become a little bit more understandable, but it wasn't as cruel as it was during the early part of the late, as it wasn't during the late 19th and early part of the 20th century. Eric just sent me another message of Walt. This is oh wow. Eric, I'm going to have to read this after what you sent me, because this would take me a while for me to read. I'll have to add that picture later into the slideshow. Oh, this right here. Hang on a second, because let me fix something right over here. There was a documentary of loads of asylum. Was there? Not that I know of, Rachel. I know he was mentioned briefly on the show Scariest Places on Earth when they were focusing on that on the asylum, but I do not know if there's actually like a documentary made just about him. I'm not sure. Hang on one second here, guys, because I did have an issue. Apparently, one of the pictures was not showing. It was all the way to the side for some reason. I'm just going to fix this very quickly so we can get the full photo into the slide. Something must have, I'm not sure what happened during the editing of this, but I'm going to fix that up very quickly. So bear with me for just a moment. Oh, wow. I guess that's all of the photo? Huh. That's weird. That's really weird. I don't know why it just shows like half of a photograph. Okay. Well, either way, I got it fixed up. So we'll get back to the studio. No. You're fine, Eric. You gave me an idea now, like to add it for if I ever decide to do this one again. You've given me more information on this place. Shame I watched loads of them. Yeah, it's really surprising that they really don't talk too much about him. The only other thing that I know about Dr. Walter J. Freeman was the episode again on Scariest Places on Earth when they were talking about him for a minute. Apparently, from what I can remember, was that he would, in addition to traveling to the to being in addition for the Athens Lunatic Asylum being a regular stop for him, as one historian said, he would travel around the country and would often use, his tools, his ice picks. And apparently this guy could basically do this for 20 lobotomies a day, because it would only take 20, 30 seconds just to put one of those pins in and take one of those picks and spin it around and destroy the frontal lobe, and off he went to do the next one. But yeah, right here, these are two different photos of apparently the alligator that lived in the fountain. That's just crazy. Kind of makes me wonder, though. I mean, it didn't really say too much, but kind of made me wonder how many people were either sitting by the fountain or looking in, and all of a sudden this big mass comes up and tries snapping at you. So I'm actually even more, I'm actually surprised that you know what? Upon looking at the picture, like this one in particular, I'm not sure if that's just background or what, but it looks like there's some sort of fence or something behind in the background, or a gate of some, either like a fence or a gate of some sort. That, if I'm correct, that's probably how it kept everybody safe from getting snapped by the alligator. Now, many mysteries surround the asylum due to the secrecy and lack of information surrounding the patients who were treated there. The cemeteries at the Ridges are full of history and mystery of their own, which, to kind of take it a little bit off track, focusing now on the cemeteries of the Athens Lunatic Asylum. The asylum needed to construct 3 cemeteries to accommodate the dead that had either no family or had never been claimed by their families. There are 1,930 people buried at the 3 cemeteries located at the Ridges, many of which are unmarked graves. Of those, as I mentioned earlier, 700 women and 959 men lay under the headstones marked with only a number. Now, there were some patients who had died that were reunited with their families and buried in cemeteries around their homes, which was typical of cemeteries at that time. It was typical of some families who lived on the property that had a family cemetery nearby. Additionally, many were unidentified Civil War veterans. Apparently, Ohio University also buried the cadavers used in its medical classes here. However, most of these people were patients who were unclaimed by their families and are marked with only a number, their names dying with them. A truly heartbreaking thought. Their names are now lost, having only been written down in record ledgers that are now non-existent. Damn shame. Only one record book remains, giving names to just 1,700 graves out of over 2,000 before 1972. By 1943, the state of Ohio began putting names, births, and deaths on the markers of the patients who died. It is unknown as to why the state switched from using only numbers to using names in order to verify who the deceased were. But this practice remained constant, though the remainder of time that patients were buried up at the asylum. Although the newer stones had names, births, and deaths, the older stones that remained had not been replaced until recently. After 1980, the state had stopped caring for the 3 cemeteries, which left it open for teens to vandalize, and natural elements and weathering caused irreparable damage to the headstones. Many of the headstones have been uprooted, broken, or stolen. Again, typical of abandoned cemeteries, very much like what we have over here in Chicago with Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, which is often considered one of the most vandalized cemeteries in the world. In the country, if not the world, I should probably say. In 2000, the Athens, Ohio National Alliance of Mental Health began to reclaim the graves and repair and restore them as much as possible and restore the cemetery as a whole, bringing their memory back to the forefront. They're also gathering information about the patients buried there. So slowly but surely, they are trying to put that information, they are trying to put everybody's names on those gravestones in a way of how they can be remembered. The grounds are now under the care of the Ohio Department of Mental Health today. Now, going back to the asylum itself, By 1950, the facility had expanded exponentially when 2 other hospitals and cottages were built to house more patients. At this point, it was treating 1,800 patients on 1,019 acres, 78 building campuses at this point, and was the town's largest employer, almost triple what Kirkbride originally envisioned by the mid-50s. At its peak, the Athens Lunatic Asylum served 15 different Ohio counties: Adams, Athens, Gallia, Highland, Hocking, Jackson, Lawrence, Meigs, Morgan, Perry, Pike, Ross, Scioto, Vinton, and Washington counties. Throughout the decade, psychiatry sought new ways to help patients and alleviate their suffering. See, it's showing some of the same stuff again, including hydrotherapy, electroshock lobotomy, and art therapy. Research began to show that the mentally ill did not pose an inherent danger to the people around them, and that it wasn't necessary to separate them from their homes and communities. The public became increasingly aware. You know what? Actually, now I think about it, maybe it was appropriate to leave some of that same information in, because now this kind of goes along with how the public felt. So they became increasingly aware of the risks and procedures like electroshock therapy and the lobotomy, which would come to be seen as cruel, unnecessary, and inhumane. Also in the 50s, a major breakthrough happened with the release of the first psychotropic drugs for treatment of mental illness. The availability of psychoactive drugs for the treatment of mental illness, as well as the increasing prevalence of psychological therapy, allowed for more patients to be treated without the need for internment in a prison-like institution, and provided sometimes dramatic improvements in mental function, reducing the need for institutionalization. By 1960, they once again had 2,000 patients. This was over 3 times, and once again, the max capacity, and led to patients becoming aggressive with one another and staff. The Athens, now, as we move forward throughout its history, some of you guys may have heard of this particular person, although I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are going to be rather unfamiliar. The Athens Lunatic Asylum hit the news at least twice, and not in a good way. The first time was in 1977, where there was a huge court case involving Billy Milligan. He committed and was being charged with several felonies, including kidnapping, armed robbery, and 3 counts of raping 3 Ohio State University students on campus. His defense claimed he suffered from a multiple personality disorder, and his other personalities committed the crimes without him even knowing it. When he was examined by a psychologist, he was officially diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, and it was found he had suffered from this since childhood. Milligan was the first person to have his case acquitted for such serious charges on the count of insanity or mental disorder. He was sent to several different mental health hospitals, including Athens. During his stays at these hospitals, it was reported at first he had 10 different personalities, but later they found he had 14 more. Unbelievable. After spending a decade in mental health hospitals, he was discharged. I forgot to also add, he was discharged and released. He later died of cancer at the age of 59 in an Ohio nursing home on December 12, 2014. So this was almost 10 years ago, and very recent that he passed away. Rachel, this pretty much, I think this pretty much gives that I think I probably answered your question already for this. Now the other time that the Athens Lunatic Asylum hit the news, and this is probably the most notorious story. You cannot think about this place and also the history and even the ghost stories associated with this place without hearing this very important chapter involving one very unfortunate event that occurred during the years of its operation. So this in fact occurred a year later on December 1st, 1978. The Athens Lunatic Asylum was in the papers again, this time because patient Margaret Schilling, this is an actual picture of her, had disappeared from one of the remaining active wards of her department. Margaret, who suffered from an antisocial disorder, and several other patients, was reportedly playing a game of hide and seek with some of the nurses and had reign of the grounds and often wandered throughout the building. The story claims while playing this game with the nurses, they got distracted and continued with their duties, forgetting to look for Margaret. She had somehow managed to sneak into a part of the building, Building 20, that had been abandoned a year prior and got locked in. Another version of the story says that she was a deaf mute who hid from the staff while vacating the hospital. Many think she locked herself in an empty room and was unable to call out for help. Trapped and alone, she succumbed to heart failure due to exposure of the dead of winter in the unheated ward. A search of the entire grounds was conducted the next day when they realized she was missing, but Margaret was not found. They searched everywhere except on the top floor of Building 20. It wasn't until 42 days later, on January 12, 1979, when a maintenance worker was moving some boxes, that her severely decomposing corpse was found. Her body was found lying naked on her back, with her arms crossed over her chest. Now, not to make this photo of her relatively eerie, but the fact that she was found on her back with her arms crossed over her chest. Look at the picture right here. This photo right here has her arms crossed over her chest, or nearly, not necessarily, but almost nearly crossed over her chest. It's just kind of an eerie sight, the way how her position is, knowing that she was pretty much found very much in a similar position after she died. Now, prior to her death, as I just mentioned, she took her clothes off. She took off her clothes and neatly folded them in a pile and put them on a chair in a corner and laid down on the cold concrete floor to die. According to the pathologist's official report, Margaret died of natural causes, most likely a heart attack or cardiac arrest. There are a lot of mysteries surrounding her death. When her body was taken away, it left an impression and stain outlining the places where her body touched the concrete floor was left behind. Probably due to the decomposition of bodily fluids in combination with the bright sun coming through the large windows, causing a chemical reaction between the body and the concrete during decomposition. Very much like glue in a way. It's like part of her body basically glued to the concrete floor. And even more strangely, no matter how many times they scrubbed the floor, no amount of scrubbing was able to remove it. The stain that Margaret left behind reappears every time it is cleaned up, and therefore is impossible to clean. It remains etched into the concrete floor even up to this day. And this is a photo of the stain that remains in Building 20 to this very day. I can't even imagine, for anybody who's been up there, they have to have it's got to be an unsettling feeling. Just want to see what everybody's saying. I only got a few minutes left before I have to get off here. Yes, it is very eerie, Rachel. And that would happen. Yep, that would happen to a decomposing body. So by the 1980s, treatment for the mentally ill changed radically and moved away from institutionalization toward treatment in the community, either as outpatients or in smaller group homes placed in residential neighborhood settings. So it closed as an asylum, but reopened as a hospital. This photo actually was taken in 1981, so this was during among one of the last few years of its operation. As patient numbers continued to decline due to the success of drug treatment, the asylum housed less than 300 patients by 1981, and so they decided to transfer 300 acres of land to the Ohio State University. President Ronald Reagan's deinstitutionalization process was the final nail in the coffin for America's mental institutions. Thousands of mentally unstable people were released into the streets, and homelessness rose across the country. The asylum population was reduced from 1,800 to 200 by 1985. A new modern hospital was built, which was Appalachian Behavioral Health Care. In 1988, the Ohio Department of Mental Health gave the deed to the grounds, excluding the cemeteries, and the state transferred the facility to the stewardship of Ohio University Community Contest, renamed the asylum to the Ridges. This is what I was talking about earlier. You guys were probably wondering, why was it essentially called the Ridges? This name was chosen in name contest, which was organized in 1984. Until then, as I mentioned very early in the show, it had at least 8 other names. The remaining patients had to be transferred to other facilities in the area. By the early 1990s, many of the original buildings had deteriorated beyond repair and fallen into disrepair, and most were abandoned following a similar pattern of decline and neglect among Kirkbride plant asylums. As the mental health care industry transitioned away from large centralized institutions, the will to support sprawling hospital complexes diminished. Large asylums were slowly phased out, with most operations shifting to small outpatient centers scattered throughout the community. Because the asylums were typically located on a hill outside the nearest municipal center, the degradation was able to occur out of sight and out of mind. Under private ownership, abandoned Kirkbrides were often languished, unmaintained, and unsecured, slowly being reclaimed by nature, as with Hudson River State Hospital in New York. Since abandoned structures represent a serious insurance liability, there is an incentive for the property owner to secure them. And abandoned property owned by colleges and universities may be especially easy targets for urban exploration, squatting, or vandalism by members of the student body or the general public. In 1993, the last patients transferred to nearby Appalachian Behavioral Health Care Facility. This course of action led to the closing of the Athens State Hospital complex and discussion of its possible demolition. Instead, the state of Ohio transferred the property to Ohio University in a land swap with the state's Department of Mental Health, which had been gradually upgrading the Erie buildings as new uses are found for the space. The Ohio University acquired the former insane asylum's campus in the 1990s. The building stood vacant, abandoned, and crumbling for several years until a section of the main building was renovated into an art museum, studios, and offices. Under the ownership of Ohio University, the property was kept in relatively good shape and was maintained for reuse. In 2001, the main building was called Lynn Hall and consisted of music, geology, biotechnology, offices, storage, and the Kennedy Museum of Art. With urban exploration and modern ruins occupying a growing niche of public consciousness through entertainment and media, Kirkbride plant asylums have enjoyed renewed public attention in the early 2000s and 2010s. 2 historically significant Kirkbrides, Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts and the aforementioned Hudson River State Hospital in New York, I should have put pictures in this slide, fell into dangerous disrepair in the 1990s and early 2000s, and eventually underwent partial demolition to make way for new development. At Athens, The ownership of a stable funding authority, Ohio University, has ensured restoration of much of the original grounds as envisioned by the original planners. Most buildings have been renovated and turned into classrooms and office buildings. The Dairy Barn Southeastern Ohio Cultural Arts Center, a nonprofit arts organization, is located in the old hospital's remodeled Dairy Bar. It is privately owned and operated. The Dairy Bar operates a calendar for sculpting and exhibits. The George V. Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs is also located at the Ridges in a set of 3 separate buildings across the area. Almost all buildings have been renovated when the Ohio University moved in, all except for the old tubercular ward Cottage B, one of the 7 cottages used for patients with tuberculosis, which sat on a hill separated from the other buildings. Cottage B was designed, as I had a picture of it earlier for those who weren't watching, was designed to early 1900s fireproofing standards. The walls and ceiling of this particular cottage were literally packed with copious asbestos, making it difficult to remediate. I can't even say that word. This is ironic, actually, though, knowing this cottage was used for people whose lungs were already very sick. Remediate, that's what it is. The other cottages were renovated into campus for students who study at the university. Many of the other buildings got repurposed and renovated to become classes and dorms, but a lot still sit abandoned and in ruins, mostly because they are full of asbestos and lead, and would be dangerous to the health of the community if they were to be torn down. Cottage B was demolished by Ohio University in 2013 due to the large number of college students exploring the dangerous structure. Members of the Athens, Ohio chapter of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, have worked to restore the 3 graveyards located on the grounds of the Ridges. School organizations provide tours of the facility around Halloween time each year. The preserve is also regularly used by the school's Army ROTC Battalion. The George V. Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs is also located at the Ridges. See, I don't know if it's the same thing that I just said before, in a set of 3 separate buildings across the area. So as for the Ridges today the Ridges are part of Ohio University and house the Lynn Hall Kennedy Museum of Art, showcasing paintings and artwork of all different types of artists, an auditorium, and many offices, classrooms, and storage facilities. The Athens Lunatic Asylum consists of Athens. Okay, you know what? I already read all of these already. I don't think I need to read all through those all over again. I think you guys get the idea. I don't know what it means by the consists of the Washington County. But anyways, I gotta finish. I gotta wrap this up quickly. So we're gonna get to the ghost stories associated with this place very, very fast. So now on to the ghost stories. Just want to see quickly on the comments here. Yeah, I know. Hey, Carl, good to see you. Hello, Natalie. Appreciate you tuning in. Okay, here we go. So as I mentioned before, many patients died at the asylum. Along the line of 2,000 souls are buried in on the grounds. A lot of the elderly were sent to the asylum, and a lot of people died from tuberculosis as well, which is not surprising. Now, to talk about when we were mentioning about Margaret died in the abandoned upper floor, and people died from lobotomies as well as other brutal medical treatments, and this can cause a tortured soul to stay behind. Of course, with such a history combined with numerous deaths that occurred at the asylum, many people claim both the former asylum and the cemeteries are said to be extremely haunted, but there are more recent hauntings as well. The fact that part of the area, as I did mention earlier, also used to be an Indian burial ground makes it even more spooky. It was not long before renovation began and students began to attend classes at the Ridges. The Kennedy Museum of Art was established there, and plans were developed to turn the property into a mixed-use university development. As students began to spend more time at the Ridges, there began reports of paranormal activity. And a lot of the students that were there reported strange figures, darting shadows, and people standing behind witnesses and mirrors when no one else is there have been seen roaming around the old floors. While the truth is mixed in with legend when it comes to the asylum, there is no doubt that many people suffered here at the hands of abusive staff members and archaic methods of healing. Most appealing to the imagination is the basement. Some claim severely disabled patients were kept on chains in this dungeon-like place. I should have added, again, another picture to what the basement actually looked like, and I'll tell you guys right now, it is a very creepy and unsettling looking basement. It looks almost kind of both prison and cave-like when you see it. However, there is no evidence that patients were ever chained to the walls here, but the arches in the basement sure look creepy. Even more frightening, there are rumors of the spirits of patients who remain shackled in the basement for bad behavior still remain. Some say they've even heard chains being pulled. These many spirits are thought to be those who died or suffered at the hands of staff in the asylum. Now, of course, as far as the stain left out by Margaret Schilling after she died in Building 20, apparently left a horrific tragedy. And this actually occurred a few years after Margaret had died at the asylum. So in 1981, a student of nearby Wilson Hall who touched the stain claimed the dead woman's spirit followed her back to her dorm room. So that night she had fallen asleep and at one point opened her eyes and saw a woman's face floating level with her head. So, which, of course, absolutely frightened her. Afterwards, no one else heard from the student for about 3 or 4 days when the RA, which is the resident assistant, became concerned and went to check on the student to see what was wrong. It was found she had committed suicide. The student committed suicide under strange circumstances. And ever since then, it's been often regarded as one of the most haunted buildings on campus. Even after the suicide, to this day, the ghost of Margaret Schilling is said to walk the halls late at night, as do many former patients. She has been seen looking out of the window and staring down from the room where she was found. But she's also been seen on the other floors, as she's been seen attempting escape. It's also said that you could still hear and sometimes see Margaret's ghost in and around the room. Other former patients who died and were forgotten are also said to have stayed behind, appearing as full-bodied apparitions, standing the empty wings of the former hospital. Additionally, they're known to be the loudest, banging on windows and the walls of the old asylum, wandering the grounds, looking to catch the attention of anyone who comes looking for them. Others have heard disembodied voices, footsteps, and yells. Squeaking gurneys, strange lights, and disembodied screams echoing through the walls in the middle of the night are also commonplace. Doors open and close by themselves, and people hear footsteps when they are alone. Objects move by unseen hands. Electric anomalies, rattling door handles, and vanishing spectral images. Some of these events occurred in the area where Margaret Schilling's remains were found and were thus attributed to her, which is not uncommon for a particular entity. People also feel the presence of others, and shadow people are frequently seen. A man with a long black coat creeps out students has been creeping out students in the men's room for years. Okay, so this I'm going to play. Is this an actual? let's see how long this. Oh, wait. You know what? We won't be able to play it today because I got to wrap up. But I do have another video. I'm just going to play very quickly. It's only a 2-minute video, and the way how this person really put this video together, I like how they managed to make it look like it's an old video, almost like as if it was shot back in the 1950s or 60s. It's also quite a very eerie video to look at too. It gives some description of the building as a whole, like documentation, but also it shows some of the cemeteries. And this is only about 2.5 minutes long. So right after this, I do have to end this. The other video will have to wait until next week. So here we go. Oops. Yes, indeed, Eric. I've been there. Nameless graves. So here's some of the graves. See, just numbers. No names, just numbers. No, it's a little bit hard to see, but still, Civil War veterans. Tuberculosis ward. Oh, lobotomies. Jeez. Oh my God. That must be one of the lobotomies. Samara. That's kind of an unusual name. Okay. And I believe, okay, I think we're down on the last slide. But besides the deaths of the patients at the asylum, there are other reasons why many people believe this location to be haunted. If one, okay, you know what? I actually do need to read this because this is very, very important. This what I'm about to bring up might actually deliver some shock, and it's probably going to freak a couple of you guys out. And this is probably the most disturbing reason why not only the asylum, but the entire town of Athens is so haunted. And I have a map for this too. If one looks at the ridges, Athens Lunatic Asylum, on a map, one can draw lines connecting to 5 cemeteries that surround the town of Athens. The lines connect and make a pentagram with the asylum in the middle of the star. And it's not necessarily in the middle, but this is, if you guys can't see it too well on your screen, this right there where I'm pointing my cursor is where it's located. It is very helpful to note, tourist relief, that almost any points on a map can be connected in such a way that they create the pentagram. According to WeirdUS.com, Several gravestones are arranged in a perfect circle on the hillside for no apparent reason and in no apparent order, though it's been speculated that this was a prank pulled by OU students sometime in the 1920s. The pentagram typically represents a magical type of protection for those that are in the occult, but can also be used in the commissions of curses. The 5 cemeteries are Sims, Hanning, Cuckler, Higgins, and Zion. However, there are several other haunted cemeteries found dotted along the pentagram. A lot of people believe this is why the area is so haunted, but another reason could be due to the West Green building was built on Indian burial ground. In fact, as you saw in the video earlier, I still thought it was worth putting in. In fact, according to the British Society of Psychical Research, the 13th most haunted place on earth is Athens, Ohio itself. The cemeteries are all reportedly haunted as well. Located on grassy hills surrounded by trees, each cemetery becomes quite terrifying at night. Gravestones date back to the mid-1800s, creating an old, mysterious feel to the grounds. Many sightings of ghosts have been reported at the cemeteries of the former asylum. Shadow figures running and hiding behind trees, and headstones and strange lights are reported. And in one area, the grave's linear shapes form a circle, which is said to be a mecca for old witches and practitioners of all sorts of black arts who hold seances here and use it as a circle of power. It is claimed that one can hear Native Americans chanting and music playing at night in this area. There have even been stories of students stealing headstones and becoming haunted, and there are legends that say the ghosts of the patients walk through the hills at night. And that, everybody, officially is the end for today's slideshow. As much as I really want to play the other video, it was going to have to wait till next week. I don't know if I got to get off here and wait. I don't know if that show that is coming on is going to be after me, so I do have to get off. Eric, like I said, I've actually, believe it or not, I'm only going to spend here for another minute. I've actually been to the Ridges. We actually happened to make a stop over to these places. I mean, to this and along with a few other locations in Athens, Ohio. This was actually when we were on our way back from the Mothman Festival. This was back in 2016, and it turns out Athens, Ohio was not terribly far from where Point Pleasant, West Virginia was. So we were able to check out, and we did get access into the asylum. Unfortunately, it was broad daylight, but like I said, it was on one of those eerie, cloudy days, so it was kind of a perfect time of going out there. Unfortunately, we were only able to get access into the first and second floor of the building. The rest of it, including the access to building 20 and the basement, I believe you have to get permission or you have to reach out to one of the staff members of the university in order to gain access. Because I do know for a fact they have done ghost tours and paranormal investigations for the last couple years. For the time that I was there, I got it right. The last couple of years, I've been wanting to go back, not just to the Ridges, but also the other cemeteries and a lot of the other haunted locations throughout Athens, Ohio, and Athens and Marietta, Ohio. Trust me, I really want to go back. So if there's ever a chance that we're able to go out, I'd love to go out as well. And finally, to also add one final thing, in addition to the asylum, I've also checked out some of the cemeteries that allegedly formed the pentagram. I don't really remember exactly which cemeteries they were that I went to, but fortunately, and you guys can check this out if you guys like, for those that are interested, I could send you guys the link even. I did manage to film it live back then while we were visiting the asylum. It was actually my parents and I, and just being at even just a few of those cemeteries alone, you definitely do feel that old feeling as it said in the slideshow. But more importantly, it's just a very bizarre feeling, just being up on the hill with a lot of these wooded areas practically. Now, I haven't seen the videos since then, so I don't know if I ever captured anything since this was during the day, but we were fortunate enough, though, that we were the only ones that got to check out these cemeteries. No one else happened to be with us. So that day we had when I saw that we pretty much had some of these cemeteries to ourselves for the most part, that's when I got excited. So, but trust me, I've been wanting to go back. I need to that place is like a calling card for me. I definitely want to try to get an investigation going at the asylum and some of the other locations. Very quickly, I always wanted to investigate something maybe due to my, oh, wow. Well, when you have a history like that, it definitely causes some kind of connection to some of these locations. Oh, you're very welcome, Rachel. And it's not over yet. Okay. Should have said, yeah, Eric, if we ever get that chance of heading out to Athens, Ohio, we'll figure something out. I would be more than happy to bring you out there too. You're not that far. You're not really that far away from me. You're only like 2 hours. I think you're like 2 hours north of me up in Wisconsin. And yes, definitely, Rachel, I'll definitely send it to you. But anyways, I got to get off here because I don't know if the other show on one of the networks is running, but as usual, I just want to say thank you guys so much. And unfortunately, even though I thought I was going to be getting to a few more slideshows, considering this was the longest, I knew this one was going to kind of take over. So as a result, I wasn't able to get to those other slideshows. So guess what? I'm going to have to do a part 2. But there's probably going to be more than a part 2 because, like I said, we got a lot of locations, a lot. Because, like I said, for the first time ever, we're doing an entire town, and that's Athens, Ohio. So there are a lot of places. Oh, thanks, Eric. I really appreciate it. I was really surprised some other people didn't show up for this that I think a lot of people would have enjoyed, but they can always watch it in the replay. So thank you guys all so much. Of course, I'll be back on tomorrow on the Crime Show with Lois and Rosie. And also I'm also going to be on Supernatural Talk tomorrow night with Jeremy, Adrian, and Eileen. We're supposed to be interviewing Robert Murphy, and I already forgot the other person's name. So my apologies for that. And then, of course, I'll be back on the Frighteners this Friday. So a lot coming up. Again, thank you guys so much because in the end, I do this for a lot of you guys. I always appreciate your support. And until next week with part 2 of Athens, Ohio, I guess, well, I know I'm going to see some of you guys tomorrow in the chat, but if not, I'll probably see some of you guys next week. You guys all have a great night.